The following program is a Creative Magic Network production. Hey guys, right before getting into it, I am giving away my ebook titled 3 Tips on How to Not Give a F, a counterintuitive guide to a life of meaning. That's right. In it, you will find tips on how to use rejection as sweet honey for your soul, how to find your life's purpose and align with the right crowd, why you should send your haters a love letter and a big, nice bouquet of roses, plus a few bonuses. That's right. You can go now at FredericBye.com. That's Frederic with a C, bye like bye.com/purpose. Oh, and by the way, when you are finished reading it, shoot me an email. I want to hear your thoughts. Go now, FredericBye.com/purpose. That's Frederic with a C, bye like bye.com/purpose.
You're listening to the Frederic Bye Show, where sky is the limit and space is the place. Here's your host, Frederic Bye.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome. Come on in, sit down, relax, put your earbuds on. This is the Frederic Bye Show. This radio podcast is about unleashing your creativity. We talk to experts, we stick with you know. It is an inspirational, magical, intuitive radio podcast as we chat with charismatic enigmas. That's right, people, artists from around the globe. Musicians, singers, radio hosts, business people, photographers, everything in between. I am Frederic Bye, the man of the hour, the man with the power too sweet to be sour and funky like a monkey. Hey, I sting like a bee, produce sweet honey, and I am pretty. I am your favorite Frankie Knocker, and today, it is our biggest episode to date. This is a fascinating guest. This is somebody I look up to. This is somebody that I use as material. This is somebody that I highly respect, and I'm so glad to have him here on the Frederic Bye Show. His name is Neale Donald Walsch. That's right, and he wrote the 4th book of Conversations with God. You know, coming at a time when humanity is facing especially challenging times and an uncertain future, Conversations with God, book 4, Awaken the Species, that's what it's called. So it shows us that we can raise our level of consciousness. We can raise it to a new level of creation and action that provides individual and collective hope for mankind and the planet. And today, Neale is really an open guy. He talks, he's always also a calm guy. I love this conversation. And today he's going to talk about how the book came about. He's going to talk about his amazing story about how he got first published. I love these kinds of stories. So many of you out there want to get published. Hey, listen to this one. And also, he's going to talk about what new information you will find in his new book. And I promise you people, you will be surprised, okay? Stay tuned, listen to this. It's a great interview. It's one of my best. It's obviously our biggest. And obviously he's going to talk about a lot more stuff than that. So, without further ado, let's get to the conversation right now. All right, so first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for showing up on Frederic Bye Show, for doing this interview. I am honored, and, I am honored and glad to have you here. Let me start off by saying, millions of people have read your books, but there are many people who still, in spite of that, have not heard of you or don't know about your story. They don't know your story. Could you just please tell us a bit about how you came to write a book called Conversations with God? What is the story behind that series of books?
Well, it all began now almost 25 years ago when I was going through a period of time in my life when nothing was working. My career had reached a dead end. My health was really going downhill rapidly. My personal relationship had fallen apart. Nothing in my life was working. And so I woke up one night at 4:23 in the morning calling out to God, what does it take to make life work? What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? Somebody tell me the rules. I'll play. Just tell me the rules. What happened was I just got out of bed and I found myself in the living room. And there was a yellow legal pad on the coffee table, so I began writing a very angry letter to God, in which I wrote out all those questions. I began I heard a voice over my right shoulder that said to me, "Do you really want answers to all these questions? Or are you just venting?" And I recall thinking, well, I am venting, but if you have answers, I'd sure as heck like to know what they are. And with that, I received answers immediately, almost like a download to all the questions I had been asked. And I began writing those answers that I was hearing in my mind. First, I was hearing them actually in the room as an audible voice. Then, very quickly, the answers came to me as thoughts in my mind, in a voiceless voice, the voice of one's own thoughts. Except they weren't my thoughts, because they were answers that I would never have dreamt up, never have thought of in my life. So I wrote them down very quickly. And as you can imagine, the answers that I was receiving brought me other questions. And so I would ask those questions and get answers to those questions. And pretty soon I found myself involved in a non-paper dialogue with God. Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer, which was the dialogue that now millions of people have read in 37 languages in countries around the world. In fact, that dialogue has filled actually 4 books of back and forth dialogue in that form, and other books as well. The latest book in that Conversations with God series, book 4, will be released, in fact, in March of this year, 2017. So that's how it all began. And I have to tell you that I never even imagined that this sort of thing would occur in my life. It's just what happened.
Awesome. That's amazing. Now, if you were not expecting it to happen, how did this experience you had that you call Conversations with God wind up being a book?
As you can imagine, I was having a difficult time really grasping the thought that I was really receiving a direct communication from the divine. So I was looking for proof of some kind. I got my opportunity to ask for proof when the dialogue said to me, "This will one day become a book." I knew, of course, that the chance of any publisher publishing a book by a man, a totally unheard of, unpublished author, claiming to be having a conversation with God, the chances of something such as a book being published were one in a million. It just simply wasn't going to happen. So I had my handwritten notes typed up by a stenographer and sent off to a handful of publishers. Not many, 3 or 4, maybe I think 5 publishers altogether. And I got rejection letters from 4 of the 5, but the 5th, actually from all 5, but the one of the 5 sent me an interesting rejection letter. It said, "Unfortunately, your material does not fit our titles list." And I knew that was not true, because the titles list was nothing but spiritual titles. That's all the publisher put out into the marketplace were spiritual books. So I knew then that they had not actually read the material. They just simply sent a form letter back indicating that the book did not fit their titles list. At that point, I slapped a personal handwritten note on the same yellow legal pad, I might add. I tore it off. It went through many yellow legal pads, but on the same kind of yellow legal pad. And the note said, "Read any 10 pages. Then tell me you don't like the book. I dare you." So I sent the manuscript back to the publishing house. I phoned ahead and said, could I have the name of the man who owns the business? And they gave me his name. And I sent it addressed directly to him. Well, the rest, as they say, is publishing history. He took me up on the dare. He read 10 pages. He picked up the phone immediately. He called me. I, of course, put my phone number in the manuscript. And he said, "We'd like to publish your book." And it was published and very quickly became an international bestseller.
Wow. Well, that is a story. I love that. I love that. Thank you very much for sharing this. Okay, I have to ask you this. Do you really believe that you actually talked with God. Okay, I'm going to play the rational, logical, I need proof scientist here, okay? Do you actually believe that God actually answered you? Do you really believe that you had a conversation with God?
Look, I believe that everyone is having conversations with God all the time. I don't think this is an experience that I'm the only one on earth who is having. I believe that the place of divine wisdom and eternal clarity exists within all of us, and that we are all having experiences of connection with, and yes, if you please, communication from that place of great wisdom that resides within all of us. We might give those experiences different names. We might call it a moment of great inspiration or a terrific idea. We might even call it an epiphany of sorts. But whatever name we give to it, it's just a way of getting around saying what I've called it, which is a conversation with God, because that's what I experience it as. And I believe that that place of divine wisdom that resides within all of us is, in fact, that aspect of divinity that resides within all of us as well. And I was told so much in my conversation with God, so that was confirmed for me. And so, yes, I believe that I had a conversation with the divine, and I believe that such conversations are open to all human beings. It is the process by which we are inspired, because the question raises an interesting secondary inquiry. From whence cometh inspiration of any kind? Where did Mozart get his inspiration? Where did Michelangelo get his inspiration? Where did Thomas Jefferson get his inspiration enough to write the Declaration of Independence in just a few days, a document that has stood the test of time? Or for that matter, William Shakespeare, or any person really who's been involved in any kind of creative form of expression. Where do we get our inspiration? Where does inspiration come from? From whence cometh creativity, or any creation of any kind? That's a profound question. And I believe that this book and this whole series of books called Conversations with God originated in that same place, the place from which all creation arises.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. The place from which all creation arises. I hear that. Now, why did you decide to write so many books and have them all published one after the other the way you have? I mean, like, didn't your intention to prove that was happening was really happening? Wasn't that intention proven? Was it resolved with the publication of the first book?
I published other books after the first book was published because the information that I was receiving, the flow of that information was continuing. It didn't stop simply because I had gathered enough back and forth dialogue to fill one full-length book. So I continued to let that information come to me. I continued to keep track of it and keep a record of it, a written record, and I continued to send it to a publisher who continued to find interest in publishing them. And so an entire series of books has been written in this fashion.
I thought that the series of dialogue books, books to be published, of conversations with God had included with the last book, had concluded with the last book, Home with God, which was published around 10 years ago. If that's true, what is this latest book about? I mean, how did it come to pass that yet one more dialogue book has now been written by you and is being published and released in March of 2017, actually, this month?
I really thought that I had received the last information in full-length book form. Of course, we're all having conversations with God all the time, but most of our conversations don't go on for days or weeks on end, providing sufficient material in a running narrative to fill an entire book. So I thought that particular version of Conversations with God, that particular experience, had really ended for me, that I had produced the books that I was invited to write, and that was the end of that, if you please. But in August of 2016, I believe it was the second day of August, I was awakened in the middle of the night. It was 4:13 in the morning, with the impulse that I had felt earlier 10 years earlier was the last time I felt it, but the impulse was unmistakable. The same inner feeling that a long and important conversation needed to take place, and that I needed to be prepared to make a record of it. And so I did. I actually got up in the middle of the night and went down to my laptop and began allowing myself to have the same experience I've had before, to have a conversation with God in writing. And out of that experience emerged Book 4 in the Conversations with God series, a full-length book which I wrote in about 10 or 12-hour spurts every day for about 4.5 weeks. And after that time, by early September, the dialogue had finished, and what resulted was the latest book in the Conversations with God series. I did not think that there would be any more books like that, and I don't know if there will be any further books like that, full-length dialogues of this type. But I do know that this particular book was important and to be received, that it was I think, vital for humanity to receive this information. And so I allowed it to be published.
Hey guys, right before continuing this conversation, join Dr. Wayne Dyer in this engaging online video course as he teaches you how to fulfill your true life's purpose, with special guests and empowering spiritual teachers like Anita Murjani, Immaculée Ilibagiza, and Scarlett Lewis. In this special online course, you will learn to hear powerful spiritual lessons and personal stories from Dr. Wayne Dyer. You will release limiting thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. You will discover why it is important to listen to and be willing to follow your inner calling. And you will live in the light of who you really are for more joy, peace, and purpose. So go now at frederickbye.com/Dyer. That's Frederick with a C, bye like bye.com/Dyer. Manifest your soul's purpose course at frederickbye.com/Dyer. I heard that. Now, what is the difference about this book from the other books? I mean, this is a fourth one, obviously. What is it? Is it the same old message, just reworked? Or is there something new here that hasn't appeared in other books? Like, what's different?
The book contains a great deal of information that's brand new. There is some repetition, of course. There are a few points that have been made in prior books that are made again in this dialogue, I'm sure for purposes of emphasis. But the main thrust of the book is a brand new look at topics that have never been covered in previous Conversations with God dialogues in this particular way. Certain of those topics have been touched on, but not in the depth that they're touched on in this book. For instance, this dialogue contains, number one, a striking invitation to everyone who reads the book, and I'll explain about that invitation in a bit. It also talks about extraterrestrials, and that is entities who are living off this planet. And it indicates that those entities are helping us. That is, they're helping human beings in the process of our individual and collective evolution. And finally, the book contains a close examination, a deep exploration of the chief behavioral differences, the ways in which we are different from, in our behavior, different from highly evolved beings who are living in a constant awakened state. So it talks about how most of humanity, which is unawakened, behaves and what those behavioral differences are. It's an amazing portion of the book containing many passages that go in depth into that description of the differences, because it gives us a basic recipe, a blueprint for how we could change the global experience of humanity if we simply embraced and adopted these 16 specific behaviors.
All right, and what are those behaviors?
Well, I can't list the behaviors here. We don't have enough time. Even if we were on the air for another couple of hours, I'd have to read the entire book to you, and I can't do it justice. And I don't want to skim over it. It's important to really read not just the list of behaviors, but the attendant material, the many in-depth passages that explain the behaviors and how they can be applied in the everyday life of average human beings. But I can give you just one example, just to give you an idea of the kind of material we're talking about. Highly evolved beings, we are told, behave in the following way. They do what they say they're going to do. They see things exactly as they are. They don't hide from themselves or hide what they're seeing from themselves, and they respond to what they're seeing by doing what works. Human beings, on the other hand, human beings who are living in an unawakened state, will look right at something and pretend that it's not there, or ignore the fact that it's there. A simple example would be the plain fact now that's accepted just about everywhere in all medical circles, that smoking is bad for your health. It says it right there on the package. But we see that, we see what's true, and we do it anyway. Or the idea that children are becoming more and more agitated, and in some cases, sadly, even violent. We're seeing stories in newspapers now about 6, 7, and 8-year-old children who are violent with each other. And it becomes clear to us that the ideas of violence that children get are being given to them by everything from television programs, cartoons, I'm sorry to say, and of course video games and a whole comic books and a wide variety of sources. And we say, even though we see that, we say that, well, you're exaggerating, that's not really a problem, or children understand the difference, they know that that's just make-believe and it's not real and so forth. Nevertheless, we see the results that occur in our society, that we have a far more violent society today than we had 25 or 50 years ago, before it was common for children at the age of 2, 3, 8, and 9 to see these images of violence portrayed in front of their eyes in very realistic terms. Just to give you an example. So highly evolved beings would never put those kinds of images in front of a 3 or a 4 or an 8-year-old entity, an offspring. Would never do that, much less do it and then pretend that it's not having any effect whatsoever, just no effect at all. Nor would they eat things that are bad for their own health, nor would they poison themselves and tell themselves that they're not poisoning themselves. There's a whole list of the behaviors. That's just one simple sample of the entire list of behaviors that highly evolved beings would never engage in. And so the book gives us, as I said, a blueprint on how we could improve overnight life on the planet Earth.
Right. That's fascinating. Improve overnight life on the planet Earth. I like that. Well, you made some very interesting statements there, Neale. About extraterrestrials. Are you saying that we are somehow being helped on the Earth by spacemen? By aliens from outer space?
Well, the answer is a little more sophisticated than that. It's not quite as raw as it was put in that question. We're not really talking about spacemen or space aliens in the sense of that we see in science fiction novels, for instance, or in the way people normally use the word aliens or spacemen. We're talking about interdimensional entities that exist in another dimension, who are assisting us here on the planet Earth and beings elsewhere in the cosmos as well, as part of their own evolutionary process. It is part of their evolutionary progress to assist other beings in the cosmos with their evolutionary process. Now, I know it's a bit unusual to hear that from a source that I claim to be a divinity revealing secrets and truths to us, but it nonetheless is what I have been told. And I'm perfectly well aware of the fact that some people might be skeptical of such a statement, or at worst, that they might actually marginalize the material and maybe even ridicule me for offering such an observation. But I would say this, if I had said that we are guided by guides in our life, or that sometimes we are being given assistance by what I would call guardian angels, far fewer eyebrows would be raised, because we've accepted in huge numbers, not in small numbers, but in huge numbers, the existence of such entities, guardian angels, spirit guides, and the existence, for that matter, of inspiration that we get from a wide variety of sources, not the least of which we claim to be God, that helps us through our daily life. So, but the fact that I have accepted the information in the dialogue and written it down and publicized it the way I have, word for word, without changing anything, without changing any of the labels, opens me, no doubt, to a bit of skepticism, and I welcome that. We should be skeptical. The real issue, however, is not whether the information with regard to beings from another dimension assisting us, whether they're angels or whatever you want to call them, is accurate or not. The real question is, does the material in this book have any value in and of itself? As a standalone experience, as we read the material, do we feel enhanced by it and benefited from the insights that the book contains? That's the question that I invite people to respond to and to explore as they pick up the material and read it, if they are inclined to do so.
Right. Now, you mentioned something earlier about an invitation in the book. What is this invitation that you are talking about?
Well, the book contains what it calls the third invitation. And it refers back to two invitations that were received by me and by all readers of the earlier Conversations with God material. Those first two invitations are change the world's mind about God, number one, and number two, give people back to themselves. That is, return them to a higher and grander and fuller, richer understanding of who they are in the universe. And the third invitation is contained in three words. The invitation is to awaken the species. That is, to live our lives in such a way that the behaviors that we exhibit and that we display in our everyday life are such that other people who are touched by us in our life and who witness those behaviors are inspired to notice who they really are. They're inspired to notice what is possible within the human experience, and they are inspired to emulate and to imitate those behaviors and to bring some of those behaviors into their daily lives as well. This is what all spiritual messengers across the centuries have done, of course. And so the third invitation is for all of us, all of those who read the material, to become, in that sense, spiritual messengers. But not one who goes out on the streets and seeks to change people's minds about anything, but a spiritual messenger in the sense of one who simply lives in a different way, marches, if you please, to a different drummer, and interacts with human beings in a way which causes others to say, this is a different way of moving through life, and I like what I'm seeing here, and I want to embrace some of these ideas into my life as well. So that is the way that we would awaken the species, and that's the invitation that we have received in Conversations with God, Book 4.
All right, now, okay, let me ask you this. How can these behaviors be integrated into our daily lives? Even if we did agree that most of them are beneficial or would be beneficial for us to embrace.
I'm happy to say that the Conversations with God, Book 4 dialogue doesn't end with just the listing of the 16 behaviors and the differences between highly evolved beings and people who are living in an unawakened state. In fact, the book offers 7 specific tools with which to help us integrate those behaviors, should we find 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of them, if not all of them, attractive enough and beneficial enough in our assessment that we want to include them in the living of our lives. So the book doesn't leave us off there with no pathway into our own future, but in fact, as I said, gives us specific grounding tools that allows us to live these behaviors, live in a brand new way, and how to get from where we are to where we want to be in the evolution of our own individual lives.
Okay, and what are those tools?
Well, I have the same response to that as I had to the question of what are the 16 behaviors. It would not do justice at any level to the material for me to try to explain some of those tools here in the brief time we have for this interview. But I think that one needs to be fair to the material by offering people an opportunity to find it there in the text itself, and take some time to be with it, to read it thoroughly, to read it again, and even read it a third time to make sure that they have really absorbed it and internalized it and understand what the message is trying to say to all of us on an individual basis.
All right. So, okay, then are you saying then that a person has to buy the book in order to benefit from its messages?
Not necessarily. I'm hoping that as time goes by, and I'm not talking 10 or 15 years, but a matter of months perhaps, that the main messages of the book can be made available to people in written form, again, so they can really digest it and be with it for very little or no cost at all. So I don't want people to think that this is a commercial enterprise in which they have to engage in order to gather this information or benefit from it. But it is quite true that in the first instance, in the first rollout of the material, if you please, the first appearance of the material, it will be in book form. And of course the publisher has to spend money to make that book available, to print it, to publish it, to design it, and to distribute it, and to place it for sale in the marketplace of ideas. So there will be some small price attached to that. But it is my intention to make certain that this material is made available ultimately to anyone who wants it, anyone who asks for it. And by the way, I make myself available as well on the internet in a variety of places and forms that to allow people an opportunity to get immediate access to me relatively quickly, ask questions, and I will give the answers to those questions to the best of my ability. One of those places that people can find access to me is at www.cwgconnect.com. cwgconnect.com is a place where people can connect with the material, all the material in the previous Conversations with God books, looked at in a wide variety of ways with in-depth opportunities to explore those messages. So, and I always want to make certain that anyone can get to this wonderful wisdom that's come through us in the Conversations with God dialogues.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. I want to, thank you very much for appearing here on the Frederic Bye Show on the Creative Magic Network. It has been an honor to have you here, and may God bless you and much success to you in the future.
I've enjoyed being here. Thank you for inviting me and asking me to be with you and giving me a chance to explain just a little bit of what's found in Book 4 of the Conversations with God dialogue series. And I hope we can maybe talk to each other again sometime. So thanks very much for the chance to share about this with you.
Alrighty, guys. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. Thank you very much, Neale, for this amazing interview. I love these people. It seems to me that these highly spiritual people always, it's always, how can I say this? It's like you gain some wisdom from hearing them, talk over and over again, and listening to these conversations is just amazing. So I'm so grateful to have him on the show, and I hope that you really enjoyed it. When you pick up his book from our website at frederickbye.com, Amazon kicks back a few bucks to the show, and it helps cover production costs at no additional cost to you. No hidden fees, no nothing. So if you like what you hear, you can help by going over to frederickbye.com. That's Frederic with a C, bye like bye.com, and click on his page, and then click the link to his book. It is really that simple. All right, guys, it's time for me to ride off into the sunset. Had a fun time today, had a great time. And, I just want to say, by the way, that this podcast is free every time you download it on iTunes, Stitcher. Please go over there, subscribe. It is listener-supported. Tell a friend, leave a 5-star review. It really helps a brother out. So with this, stay safe. And don't forget, live with purpose, passion, fire, and love. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Frederic Bye Show. For more information, go to frederickbye.com. That's Frederic with a C, bye like bye.com.